Welcome back to another episode of Multifamily AP360. And today's our guest is Carlos Samaniego from Tax Debt Consultants LLC. Welcome, Carlos.
That is it. Thank you for having me on, Rama.
Awesome, awesome. And a little bit about Carlos. Carlos is a recognized tax resolution expert, dynamic speaker, and founder of Tax Debt Consultants LLC, licensed by the U.S. Department of Treasury as an enrolled agent (EA). He specializes in resolving complex IRS and state tax issues for self-employed professionals and small business owners. Carlos is a best-selling author who co-authored Never Give Up with sports commentator Dick Vitale and wrote How to Make the IRS an Offer They Can't Refuse, sharing his personal journey and strategies for overcoming tax troubles. His upcoming book, The FTB Taxpayer Survival Guide, offers essential advice for handling tax disputes with the California Franchise Tax Board. So, with that, Carlos, you want to add anything to your background?
No, you know what? You said it perfectly there. People always say, "Can you explain simply what you do?" I go, "I fight the IRS when the IRS is coming after you for not filing your taxes or maybe owing a little bit too much money. That's what I do."
Okay, awesome, awesome. We'll jump into that.
Yeah.
So you had a remarkable journey in the tax resolution world. Can you
Yeah.
share what first inspired you to specialize in helping self-employed professionals and small business owners resolve their IRS and state tax issues?
Yeah, Rama, I didn't wake up one morning wanting to be a fighter of IRS problems. That wasn't my dream in life. My actual dream in life was actually as a little kid was becoming a medic, a paramedic. My dad was a medic in the Army during the Vietnam War, and I always dreamed of doing that. And I ended up doing that at a young age of 17 years old. I actually joined the Army and became a medic. And after a couple of years in the service, I'd realized that I didn't want to no longer be a medic in the Army, and kind of got out of the Army after a couple of years and ended up becoming an EMT paramedic in the civilian world right here locally where I still live. I did that for quite a few years, and my journey to what I'm doing now literally started then when I got the worst tax advice from one of the guys I was working with. I always say he was the older guy. He was probably 20, 21, and I was like in my late teens. And he noticed I was working a lot of overtime, and he had asked, "Why are you working so much overtime?" And I said, "Hey, just trying to make some extra money for the holidays." And he's, "Hey, just take your paycheck, let human resources know that you want to claim 10 exemptions on your paycheck, because when you do that, they take out less taxes." And I did that. So they took out less taxes out of my paycheck. It was one of the worst financial advice that I ever got. And it's a thing I always tell people: be careful who you take financial advice from. And because I did that, when it was time to file my taxes, I ended up having a big tax bill with the IRS. So what I did stupidly is I didn't file that tax return because I had no way of paying the tax bill. So I didn't file the tax return. I didn't make any changes the rest of the year, and another tax season came. I went to go prepare my taxes, and I had another huge tax bill. Rama, that happened for 8 years. I went literally 8 years not filing my taxes, building up a huge tax bill where I ended up owing almost $100,000 in taxes between the IRS and the state of California. And I had all these unfiled tax returns. And then flash forward a few more years, the IRS hadn't come after me. The state of California did come after me. And by this time, I had left the paramedic industry and ended up becoming a self-employed individual, started working side gigs or side hustles, as they're called. I was doing a variety of business ventures. I even started doing taxes, Rama, during this time frame. Here I was, there was a guy that didn't file his taxes, and I actually got a license to prepare taxes. So I ended up doing that. And then in my mid 30s, by the time I got in my mid 30s, I actually got into the real estate industry, became a mortgage lender. And while I was a mortgage lender, I ended up meeting a soon to be client who I ended up falling in love with, and actually we ended up started dating, and we eventually got married a few years later. Again, I'm in my mid-30s, and at this time, I still had not really dealt with my tax problems. But when I got married to this young lady, her name was Elizabeth, I had realized she married into my tax problems because I hadn't dealt with the problems. I got married to her. Now my tax problems were her tax problems. Once you get married, those finances get combined, right? So I had actually realized at that moment in time, don't ever do that, guys or gals. Don't marry somebody with major financial problems like that. Let them know what's going on. But fortunately for me, I had realized what I did. I ended up reaching out to somebody that specialized in helping people with back tax problems. Ended up talking to that individual. His name was Ernie, and he ended up telling me that he was going to fix my problems. And then at that point in time, I went to Liz and told her, I confessed. I told her I had something to share with her. I told her my problems. I had went 8 years not filing my taxes. I owed the IRS and the state. And fortunately for me, she did not leave me. She actually told me, what's the plan? Are we going to get it fixed? And we ended up getting that fixed. And this was over 20 years ago, this had happened. And flash forward to today, I sit here in my office. That same woman is sitting over my shoulders. We co-founded a company called Tax Debt Consultants, which specializes in helping people deal with their tax problems. So that's how I got involved into it. It wasn't dreamt about it. I fell into it by becoming the client we help.
Yeah, it's a kind of full circle moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So, as a licensed enrolled agent and tax resolution expert, so what are some of the most common tax problems small business owners and self-employed individuals face, and what advice do you have for presenting these issues, preventing these issues?
Yeah, I would say 90% of my clients are self-employed, small business owners, entrepreneurs, and even people who became entrepreneurs or small business owners and didn't realize they became entrepreneurs, small business owners. And let me explain what I mean by that. Over the last couple of years, a lot of new opportunities have popped up, like Uber Eats, a lot of these delivery services are out there, or doing online jobs, taking on jobs from online websites like Fiverr, doing kind of side gigs. So a lot of people don't realize is that once you start working and making that side income like that, you have actually just become a business owner. And there are certain requirements that are needed upon you. And nobody's really sat down and told them that. So for all these people, the big thing I see, the biggest mistake entrepreneurs and small business owners make is a lot of times they're earning money, they're doing a good job earning money, but they don't treat it like a business, like what it actually is. They make their money and and I'll just use that as an example, an Uber driver, or it could be like a real estate agent where they go start working and they make their commission or make their income and they just put it all in their bank account and they spend all the money. They're thinking as an employee, earn money, goes in my check, and then I use it to pay my bills. As a business owner, what we got to do is take that money that we earn. It should be going into a separate account, whether it's a business bank account, and it doesn't even have to be a business bank account, just a separate checking account where all that business income goes in there. And then making sure that all your expenses that you're accumulating for a small business, whether it's as a real estate agent, advertising you might be spending, money that you might be spending to get listings, or the expenses of being a real estate agent, the different associations you got to be. So making sure all your expenses come out of there. And then once those expenses have come out of there, also realizing that you need to take a portion of that money and save it for taxes, which are basically called estimated taxes that need to be paid. Because most people need to understand, as a self-employed individual, the government is not taking those taxes out automatically like they do on your paycheck. So you have to pay those taxes. So what happens is that because they're not keeping track of that information, the income coming in, your expenses, they're waiting an entire year, and then tax time comes around, and then they're finding out that they're owing two, three, four, $10,000 in taxes, and then all of a sudden they're in this wheel of, oh my God, what just happened? And a lot of times what happens is that they think it might have been a fluke and it was just a one-time thing. Then the following year happens and it happens again. And now that's where that little snowball starts to build up, where it was a little tax bill. What happened to me ended up becoming a monster of a tax bill that has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
So that's one of my first tips, is just making sure, one, to simplify that, have a separate account where all that income and expenses are going. Keep track of all your expenses, especially for people, self-employed people that may be using their cars. I think one of the best things you can do, there's an app called Mile IQ. It actually keeps track of all your miles that when you're using your car, because using your car can tend to be one of the biggest tax write-offs you have, and you need an app to keep track of those miles because you have to know how many miles that you have. So those are two of the big tips that I'm always looking out for, because just people don't keep track of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And self-employed professionals and small business owners often face unique challenges when dealing with the IRS and state tax authorities.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the most complex tax issues you have seen these individuals struggle with, and how can they avoid them in the first place?
Yeah. The two biggest things that I see is, one, we're seeing more and more of unfiled tax returns. And what I mean by that, there's over 10 million people a year that do not file tax returns for whatever reason. And this is becoming a huge challenge, and it's becoming a big thing that the IRS is really looking out for, is people that just don't file their tax returns. And a lot of people don't realize is that the government, when you don't file a tax return, the federal government especially get third-party information. So when you're earning an income from your side gigs, the jobs that you're doing, all that's being reported to the IRS. And then what happens is that they know that you're not filing your tax returns. And a lot of times there's a big misconception that the IRS doesn't know about it, especially the last few years. Because we went through COVID for almost a 3 to 4 year time frame, the government purposely during this time frame did not notify people. If you owed the IRS money, or maybe you didn't file your tax returns, they weren't sending any letters out. They were actually prohibited from doing that by the government. They didn't want people to have to deal with financial issues while we're dealing with this pandemic going on, right? So there was a false sense of security that they don't know that I owe money, or they're not coming after me for they're not filed tax returns. But what happened is that just June of last year, the IRS kind of turned the switch back on. And now all of a sudden, all these people are getting notices left and right, and they're going, wait a second, they haven't said nothing for 4 years. What just happened? All that happened is that they turned the computer systems back on, and now they're sending them letters. So going back to answering your question, not filing the tax returns is becoming a big issue. One thing people don't understand, you can owe the IRS millions of dollars. You can't go to jail for owing millions of dollars. All they can do is try to collect the money from you based on your ability to pay. But for people that don't file their tax returns, that's a punishable offense, up to 1 year in jail per tax return that's not filed. So if you're listening to this and haven't filed your tax returns, the most important thing is talk to a person like myself that understands what tax returns need to be filed. Because here's the good news: the IRS may not want all the years of non-filed tax returns. Rama, I had people come in here with 19 years of unfiled tax returns. The last thing you want to do is file all 19 years. Talk to somebody like myself to figure out what years need to be filed. So that's the first one, is unfiled tax returns. The other one is just the people that have past due balances that have been just not dealing with the past due balances. Understand that the IRS has a lot of great resources for you to be able to either possibly get rid of the tax debt, negotiate the tax debt, possibly if you have no ability to pay. The economy, there's a lot of, especially in the real estate world, there's not a lot of people are making the money that they were making over the last 10 years, because real estate has really slowed down in terms of real estate sales. So a lot of these individuals don't have the income that they have. There's a possibility that if they owe a lot of money, that we can get the IRS to back off and maybe not even collect. It's called currently not collectible status. In fact, I just worked on a file today to find out. I had a client that does not have to pay the IRS because they don't have the ability to pay the IRS right now. And there's some other options, and maybe it's a payment plan with the IRS, but got to be really careful when dealing with the IRS because they will give you a payment plan sometimes you cannot afford. And we want to make sure we go to them and get an affordable installment agreement based on their current financial information.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. So when dealing with complicated IRS or state issues, what is the first step you take in helping a self-employed or small business owner find a resolution? What strategies do you use to simplify the process for them?
You know what? This is a beautiful question, Rama, because here's the thing. The most important step before doing anything, before I talk to the IRS, is what I call my phase one investigation. And let me explain what this means. Being a former paramedic, I really understand the medical industry really good, right? And when somebody has a medical problem, and let's just pretend, Rama, you called me up and I'm a doctor and you have this extreme pain in the back of your head and you don't know what's going on. You just got this extreme pain. Now, if you were to call your doctor and just say, hey, doctor, I have an extreme pain in my head, and he told you, Rama, you need to come in next Friday for brain surgery, you'd probably run, right? You would be nervous, like, wait a second. How do you know I need brain surgery? I just told you I had a pain in my head. Here's what the doctor does, right? What the doctor says is that, you know what, Rama, why don't you come in? Let's order some labs. Let's get some blood, some x-rays done, maybe even an MRI to find out what is going on, what the problem is. So once we know what the problem is, then we understand how we can treat the pain in your head. Rama, it might be a headache and you might just need some Tylenol, or there might be something going on there and we might have to do surgery, but that would be worst case scenario. Here's why I bring this up. When it comes to tax problems, it's the same thing. A lot of times when people haven't owe a lot of money to the IRS, haven't filed, they don't even know how bad the problem really is. They might be getting a letter here and there. They think they have an IRS problem. Sometimes money comes out of their bank account, and I get this all the time, and they're like, Carlos, the IRS took out money, to only find out it wasn't even the IRS. It was the state of California for income taxes. So most people don't know the type of problem they're in with their taxes. They just know they got a problem. So my first step is just like being a doctor, is I file a power of attorney with the IRS. That way with the IRS and the state, that way I can go find out for them what exactly the problem is. How many years of tax returns? I can find out when was the last time you filed? What tax returns are missing? What does the IRS claim that you owe? What type of penalties and interest do you have? When does your tax debt expire? Tax debt does expire. Who reported income on you for the last 10 years? And then we can get all the 1099s and W-2s. We find out all this information. So now that I have all this information, I can sit down with the client a few weeks later, sit down and say, here is what's going on with the IRS, and here is what's going on with your state. So these are the problems that we have, and now here's the game plan on how to solve that problem. Now we know exactly how to solve the problem on a question that they don't even know what the problem is when they first get started with us. So that's step one, is just figuring out what the problem is. That way we know how to effectively deal with it. And most importantly, not get overcharged and overcharge more money than you need to get charged with, whether it's from the government or from anybody else.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. So what are the key differences between resolving tax issues with the IRS versus state tax authorities? And are there any specific strategies or tactics you recommend for handling these disputes based on the client's location or situation?
Great question. Here's the big difference between the two. What state are you in, Rama?
North Carolina.
Atlanta?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay. Which has a state tax authority, if I remember correctly. Here's the big difference between the two. Is the state will come after you much faster than the IRS and tends to be a lot more aggressive than the IRS, and a lot of times tend to have less options than the IRS. I'm in the state of California, which is one of the worst states when it comes down to owing taxes. And I tell people, if you're in any state that has a state taxing authority, they're going to be worse, because here's the big difference. the US government basically can print money, right? That's why our deficits go up. They can print money anytime they want to pay their bills. None of the state authorities have that ability to pay money. So they really do rely on that income tax that you're paying. So if you got a past due balance with them, they're really going to come after you, and they're going to come after you much faster. In fact, Rama, when I'm dealing with the IRS problems, the minute somebody calls me about I got an IRS problems, after we have that discussion, I jump right into let's talk about the state that you're in. What's going on with your state? Because 99% of the time when somebody calls me that, and they will say it this way, that Carlos, the IRS took money out of my bank account. 99% of the time, it's not the IRS. It was the local state taxing authorities, the one that took out the money. So when we're dealing with this, I tell everybody, you have to deal with, here's the way I do it. When we got a state taxing authority, I deal with the state first. That way we know what they want, how much money that they're going to owe, to figure out how to best resolve that. Because when it's time to come to deal with the IRS, I want to let them know that you have money that you're paying to the state, and I want them to be able to use that money in your calculations when we're trying to figure out what to do with the IRS. So that's the big difference. It's just they move faster, they're a lot more aggressive, and we have to deal with them. Like California, I'll give you a perfect example. The chances of them doing an offer and compromise, that's where we wipe out tax debt, are almost slim to none. They feel that we will wait the rest of your life to collect that money and try to collect on that money no matter what. We don't care how much money it is.
Yeah, got it. So you have written multiple books, including How to Make the IRS an Offer They Can't Refuse.
Yeah.
Can you explain what the concept of an
Yeah.
offer to the IRS is and how it can be a game changer for tax
Absolutely.
dealing with tax debt?
Yeah. So this is my book here, and I'm going to give at the end of this call, I'll give you the link where everybody can get this book for free. This was my very first book called How to Make the IRS an Offer They Can't Refuse. And basically, I talk about, it even says right here, in this book, I talk about the 3 steps that you must take to handle your tax debt problems, reduce your tax debt, and get the IRS hitman off your back. The reason I wrote this book is that one of my favorite movies is The Godfather. And I started to realize the IRS is very similar to the mafia in a lot of different ways. They have IRS hitmen. Here's what I mean by IRS hitmen. They're called revenue officers. When you owe money to the IRS and you've been avoiding the IRS or haven't filed your tax returns in a long time, the IRS will assign a revenue officer, IRS hitman, to your case, and their sole job is to come after you to see how much money they can collect from you. That is their only job. They used to come to your business or your home and knock on your door. They recently stopped doing that because somewhere on the East Coast, I believe it was Arkansas. Don't quote me on the state. It was somewhere on the East Coast. A couple of IRS officers went to a house and they got shot. So the IRS basically stopped the practice of going to houses or businesses. Now they send you a legal summons for you to come to their house to have that discussion. But the IRS basically, they have the power to collect all information about you. The mafia has a very similar power, right? And they want to get paid. And with this book, I also talk about the law of omerta. And if you know the mafia and the world and how it works, omerta is this law that people in the mafia don't talk about the mafia. It's a silent organization. If you're in the mafia, you don't talk about it. And I think that people with tax problems live with the same law of omerta, because people with tax problems like myself, we don't talk about it. It's not a topic that you go to your family dinners saying, hey, I haven't paid my taxes in years, or I haven't filed in years. So it's a secret that a lot of people have, and they don't know who to talk to. In fact, they don't talk to their spouses. I didn't tell my spouse. I was dating her for years. I didn't ever tell her. And I've had multiple situations where couples come in here because one couple discovers another spouse has not been paying their taxes or hasn't filed. So it's the secret people live with. And my job is to let them know there's hope. And that's what this book is about. There's hope. You can be a person like me that went 8 years not filing their taxes. that married somebody and didn't tell her. But it's possible there is light at the end of the tunnel. I don't care if you owe millions of dollars or $10,000. There's light at the end of the tunnel. You just need to find somebody that knows how to deal with the IRS. And Rama, you didn't ask this question, but I'd like to answer this.
Yeah.
There's only 3 people in the country that can help you with tax problems. Only 3. It's a CPA, a tax attorney. Let me start with CPA and tax attorneys. They can legally represent you in front of the IRS for your tax problems. The problem is 97% of them, that's not the type of work that they do. They don't specialize in that. They do taxes, they do lawyer work, but they don't specialize in representing people. There's one other title that can do it, and that's my title. I'm an enrolled agent licensed by the Department of Treasury, the IRS, to legally represent people with tax problems. With my license, I've been given a license by the federal government to be able to represent you on your behalf. So you want to make sure that you're talking to somebody that not only has that license, that's licensed to do that, but also, most importantly, that has experience at doing it. Because just because they have the license, they might not have the experience. This is all we do. My job is every day I'm talking to the IRS, dealing with tax problems. That's all we do. That's just really important for everybody to know that's watching this.
Yeah. Thank you. So, any personal habits that are helping you to be successful?
You know what? For me, the biggest one is meditation, believe it or not. Something I really started doing about a year ago. If you think about it, I deal in a very stressful industry. I'm dealing with tax problems and people's challenges in life, and I'm talking to government employees every single day. So that stress level really gets up. And I recently learned transcendental meditation about a year ago. And for me to be able to take some time once, the goal is twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening. But if I can at least do it once a day to be able to sit down and clear my mind, it just brings down that stress level. And for me, that's a very important thing that I do for my business to increase my success.
Yeah, sure. So, any books that impacted you?
Oh, a lot. My biggest, oh, I have it right here in my cat. Where'd it go? Oh my gosh, I just had it here. I was reading it. I've got in my own house, I got my own library in my house.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest books that have impacted me is The Power of One. Business book that basically talks about taking care of one thing at a time. It's just that power of one is to be able to do that. And I believe
One thing?
what is it? The Power of One Thing. Is that what it is?
It's one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll pull it up. It's just a very important book, but it's just because a lot of times we have 1,000 different things going on, and I finally come to that realization of multitasking doesn't work. So you got to just pick one thing and work on that one thing.
Yeah. How can listeners can connect with you, Carlos?
The best thing, you know what? I'd love have your readers go download my book for free. taxdebtbook.com. taxdebtbook.com. You can get this book for free. It's a PDF. Once you get the book, you'll get all my contact information. You'll also get added to my email list where I share success stories and horror stories of people fighting the IRS. But I think that's the best way of doing it. If you have an emergency situation, I got a tax problem today, you can go to taxdebtconsultant.com. Taxdebtconsultant.com is my website with all my contact information.
Awesome. And thank you very much, Carlos.
Thank you, Rama. Pleasure talking.
Sure.